refine my heart. In Proverbs chapter 17, verse 3, it says, the crucible for silver and the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests the heart. The Lord tests our hearts, and he gives this comparison of the crucible or the furnace refining and purifying precious metals. So what happens in a furnace? Now, there's some perhaps more modern processes that have been invented since Bible times, but the general concept anyway is in a furnace you need a lot of heat, right? That's what furnaces are about. They're very hot. And particularly with silver and gold, the melting point of gold is apparently 1064 degrees. The melting point of silver, 962 degrees, which I think is fairly warm. I'm not sure what counts for you as a hot day. If it was 1,000, that probably ticks the box. I'm not sure if you do much cooking and you need to have a hot oven turned up to 1,000 degrees. Because I'm really good at cooking, obviously. It's hard work to get to that temperature. It takes a bit of effort. It doesn't just happen by accident generally. It needs some intentional extreme conditions, some good fuel and oxygen blowing into the furnace to get to that temperature. And as that heats, the crucible, as the furnace heats up, it burns off impurities. And so metals like silver or gold, when they're found in natural state, have various other things mixed in with them. And as they get heated, some of those impurities burn off or perhaps are destroyed in some way, and things that don't belong. And the idea of that smelting process is to be able to get rid of the impurities, things that reduce the value and the preciousness and even the usefulness of the metal. And so some of those will burn off at lower temperatures before the metal melts. But they might still leave the residues behind, the soot and ash and so on. And so some impurities can be removed at lower temperatures while the metal is still hard. But if it's still hard and retaining its shape, some of that impurity is going to still be trapped inside the metal. It's still going to be stuck in there, and the metal retains its shape while it's still hard. So it can be trapped in there. At lower temperatures, the hard gold won't release and let go of what's trapped inside it. Now, interestingly enough, gold especially is actually known for being a relatively soft metal. It's ductile, it's malleable, it can be worked relatively easily by beating it and hammering it. So if we consider ourselves as the gold that God is wanting to work in, do we want to be beaten and hammered into shape? Perhaps not. It doesn't sound especially appealing, does it? So, to avoid that, we go through the furnace. And we have that increased heat. Add fuel, blow oxygen until the metal softens. And when it is softened, when it gets to that 1,000-odd degrees, the silver or gold melts and the other substances float to the top of that molten metal, float to the top as a slag that can be skimmed off or blown off. So perhaps with a bellows, I'm not sure if it's probably not quite like a birthday cake where you lean in and because, what could go wrong with blowing? I don't know if you've ever blown out a candle and like some of the wax is somehow blown back in your face or something like that. Candle wax is not all that pleasant. I imagine 1,000-degree metal blowing back on your face is probably not very pleasant either. But when it's molten, the slag, the junk, the impurities float to the top and can be removed, leaving the soft, purified, precious metal behind. And that can then be poured into a mold. It can be shaped as desired. And that pure metal probably better reflects the light that shines on it. It better reflects the light. The Holy Spirit is sometimes portrayed by fire or wind as an illustration. In the book of Acts chapter 2, the day of Pentecost, it says, "Suddenly a sound like the blowing of a violent wind came from heaven and filled the whole house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be tongues of fire that separated and came to rest on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other tongues as the Spirit enabled them." When the Holy Spirit blows on your life, it may not be comfortable. You know, I like to think of the Holy Spirit blowing like a refreshing breeze. Like that's a comforting thought. And God certainly does that. The Holy Spirit is a comforter. There's something of refreshing that we get from the Holy Spirit blowing on our lives and in our hearts. But when we consider this picture of the furnace, of the crucible, we think of the heat of the Holy Spirit blowing, the fire of the Holy Spirit, the refining fire with oxygen blown on it. It may not be so comfortable at times. The crucible for silver and the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests the heart. And so this proverb gives us a comparison. The Lord tests the heart in a similar way to a furnace purifying gold. And the Hebrew word used here for test, the Lord tests, is bakan. I know you all wanted to know that. And it means test or prove or refine. It implies a process of examination to determine quality and a refinement to remove what is undesirable. So even in that word test, obviously we're talking crucible furnace, but in that word test, it's talking about refining and determining quality. And so God isn't necessarily trying to find out what's in our hearts, because he knows that already. He's God, he knows our hearts, but he's revealing and purifying and softening and shaping our hearts.